There are nights in baseball when everything a player does is exactly right. The timing is right. The swing path is right. The pitch recognition is right. Everything that takes years of preparation and thousands of repetitions to build arrives in the same place at the same time, and the result is the kind of performance that makes the stadium feel smaller, like the game has shrunk to fit the person playing it. Shohei Ohtani had 2 of those nights in a row. Back to back. Multiple hits in each game. The kind of sustained offensive production that statistical analysts flag, that opposing pitching coaches lose sleep over, that teammates watch from the dugout with the particular expression of people witnessing something they know they will remember. And then, on the second night, in the middle of it, at the precise moment when the story should have been nothing but pure baseball, an umpire made a call that changed the temperature of everything. Not just the game. The story. And a legend, watching from outside, decided he had seen enough to say something that Dave Roberts was not going to enjoy hearing. Start with the first game. Because the first game deserves its own moment before everything else arrives. Ohtani came to the plate 4 times. He got hits in 3 of them. The first was a line drive to left field that split the outfielders precisely enough to score a runner from second base. Clean. Efficient. The kind of hit that doesn't make the highlight reel because it doesn't need to, it just scores a run and moves the game forward. The second was different. The count had worked to 3-2. The pitcher had thrown 6 pitches in the at-bat, each one a minor negotiation, each one Ohtani adjusting slightly, finding the edge of what he was willing to offer. On the 7th pitch, a fastball elevated just enough to feel like a challenge, Ohtani accepted the challenge completely. The ball left the bat at a trajectory that required no tracking system to interpret. Every person in the stadium understood it immediately. It landed in the second row of the left field seats. The third hit came in the 7th inning, a sharp grounder through the right side that the second baseman got a glove on and couldn't control. An infield single. Unglamorous. Effective. The kind of hit that tells you a player is locked in not just for the spectacular moments but for all the ordinary ones between them. 3 hits. 1 home run. 2 RBIs. A night that, by any measure, belonged entirely to him. But before the first game was fully processed, before the numbers had been properly absorbed, came the image that traveled further than any statistic. During a brief stoppage between innings, Ohtani had dropped to the warning track near the dugout steps and begun doing push-ups. Not as a performance. Not for the cameras. Simply because there was a pause in the game and his body wanted to stay warm, and that is what his body does when it wants to stay warm. The broadcast caught it almost accidentally. The director had cut to a wide shot of the field, and there, in the corner of the frame, was the most famous baseball player on earth doing push-ups on a dirt warning track between innings like a man who had nowhere more important to be. The stadium noticed. A ripple of laughter, then applause, then the particular kind of affection that crowds reserve for moments of unscripted humanity from people they had previously only seen doing extraordinary things. It lasted about 45 seconds. It was, for those 45 seconds, the most human Ohtani had looked all season. His teammates in the dugout were already laughing before he finished. The second game began with that momentum intact. Ohtani went 2 for 4. Another multi-hit performance. Another night of seeing the ball early, making decisions quickly, putting the barrel on pitches that most hitters would have fouled off or taken for strikes. Through 5 innings, the evening had the quality of a continuation, as though the first game and the second game were a single extended argument that Ohtani was making about who he was as a hitter right now, in this stretch of the season, against this level of competition. The argument was compelling. Then came the 6th inning. And the umpire. The at-bat that became the problem started simply enough. Ohtani worked the count, fouled off 2 pitches he had identified correctly but couldn't quite control, and then received a pitch on the outer edge of the plate, a location he had been sitting on, a location he had seen in his preparation, a location that the Dodgers' analytics staff had identified as the pitcher's preferred spot in 2-strike counts. He took it. The umpire called it strike 3. The tracking data, available to every press box laptop within seconds of the pitch crossing the plate, showed it missing the zone by nearly 2 inches outside. Not borderline. Not a matter of interpretation or angle or the ordinary uncertainty of human judgment. Outside. Clearly. Measurably. Ohtani's reaction was minimal. A single breath. A look downward. He took 3 steps toward the dugout and then stopped, not to argue, but because something about the call had clearly landed differently than the ordinary frustration of a missed pitch. He had been locked in. Completely locked in. And the at-bat had been taken from him not by a better pitch or a better plan, but by a call that the numbers refuted within seconds of it happening. He went to the dugout. He sat down. He said nothing. But the broadcast had caught his face in the moment between the call and the dugout steps. And what it showed was not anger. It was something quieter and, in some ways, harder to watch. It was a man absorbing an injustice and choosing, deliberately, not to let it become a scene. Dave Roberts did not go onto the field. That decision, the decision to stay in the dugout, to not argue the call, to let the inning continue without a formal protest, became the second story of the night almost immediately. By the time Roberts arrived at the post-game press conference, the question was already waiting for him. He answered it carefully. He talked about managing the long game. He talked about protecting his players from ejection situations in close contests. He talked about the overall picture of a series, the importance of keeping his roster intact, the calculation that a manager makes when he weighs the cost of a confrontation against its potential benefit. The words were reasonable. The logic was sound. But baseball had been watching. And one specific person who had been watching was not satisfied with reasonable or sound. The criticism came from a voice that carries a particular weight in this sport. A former player. A man who had stood in the batter's box for nearly 2 decades at the highest level of the game, who had managed, who had won, who had watched baseball long enough to know the difference between strategic restraint and the wrong kind of silence. His name does not need to be attached to every sentence of this story. What matters is what he said, and where he said it, and the directness with which he said it. He said that a manager's first responsibility, above strategy, above roster management, above every other calculation, is to his players. He said that when a player of Ohtani's caliber is visibly affected by an incorrect call in the middle of the best offensive stretch of his recent season, the correct response from the dugout is not silence. It is presence. It is a manager walking onto that field and making clear, on behalf of his player, that what just happened was seen and was not acceptable. He said that Roberts had missed that moment. Not harshly. Not with malice. With the particular directness of someone who has spent enough time in the game to say difficult things without needing to dress them up. Ohtani carried this team for 2 straight nights, he said, in a television segment that was clipped and shared widely before the post-game press conference had even concluded. The least his manager could do is carry him for 30 seconds. The clip ran continuously on highlight channels for the rest of the evening. Roberts was asked about the criticism directly in a follow-up session the next morning. He did not dismiss it. He did not become defensive. He sat with it in a way that suggested he had already been sitting with it privately before anyone put a microphone in front of him. I have a lot of respect for that perspective, he said. And I'm not going to tell you it hasn't made me think. It has. He paused. What I will say is that I know Shohei. I know how he processes those moments. He did not need me to go out there and escalate. He needed us to win the game. Another pause. Longer this time. Whether I made the right call, I'll be honest with you. I've been asking myself that since the 6th inning. The Dodgers won the game. Barely. By 1 run, on a sacrifice fly in the 8th inning that had nothing to do with Ohtani and everything to do with the team grinding forward after the moment in the 6th had threatened to change the mood of the entire dugout. Ohtani finished 2 for 4. The multi-hit streak continued. The numbers were good. But numbers do not capture everything. They do not capture what it looks like when the best player on a field absorbs something unfair and keeps playing anyway. They do not capture the 45 seconds of push-ups between innings, the unscripted humanity of a man who does extraordinary things and then, in the pause, simply keeps his body warm. They do not capture the question that a legend put into public air, the question about what a manager owes his player, and whether that debt was paid on the night it was owed. The game moved on. The questions did not. They rarely do, when the player at the center of them is Shohei Ohtani.